Well, what will be the impact of the Winter Olympics on our local real estate market? Rudy Nielsen of Landcor Data Corporation studied that very question and joins us now with the results of that study that he and his staff have undertaken, and joins us in studio now. Good morning. Thanks for coming.
Good morning to you. Thanks for having me.
So, as I was mentioning to Rudy during the break, tons of people around the Lower Mainland and in BC are wondering, how will the Olympics affect housing prices, whether they own or whether they're waiting to buy or something like that? And a big factor, of course, will be the Canada Line construction that's been going on for the past couple of years.
Yes.
So you looked at how Expo 86 and how the Expo Line construction affected real estate prices. What did you look at and what did you find?
What we looked at is we looked 500 meters from every station. So we looked at 20 stations. We looked at the 4 downtown, wasn't quite comparative to the other stations, so we didn't look at those 4. So we looked at 16 stations in Burnaby, New Westminster, and we looked at a 500 meter distance from there, and we looked at the growth compared to the growth before. So we looked at 1986 to 1996 and 1975 to 1986. So we compared the two 10-year periods.
Right, okay.
That's what our study showed.
And what did it show you about the real estate within those 500 meters?
Well, if you look at the different towns, some towns really were better than other towns, like Burnaby. We see that in Burnaby, 25% of the growth over those 10 years was from those 4 stations, mainly Metrotown, Edmonds. Edmonds was the big winner, and of course Patterson. We go to New West and we see the New West station, and that was about a 33% growth over the entire 10. Just from that one station, those 2 stations, 33% growth.
So how do you know that the growth around those stations didn't have, had to do with the SkyTrain as opposed to whatever factors were driving real estate growth in other parts of the area?
What we did is we also ran vacant land sales compared to the values of single-family dwellings and condos. And we found that in vacant land, there was a 250% increase in values in that 10-year period, while residential only went up 133%. So that's how we just determined just that those stations contribute to the growth of that community.
So Surrey was an interesting part of your study as well. There was an expansion of SkyTrain stations after Expo 86 that brought the Expo line further out into Surrey. And what did you learn from that?
We learned that there wasn't good planning in Surrey. The Surrey line, which went from New Westminster into Surrey, and we only saw that 1.6% of the growth was contributed to those stations over that 10-year period to the rest of the city.
But there was growth eventually.
There was growth eventually, but at that 10-year period we studied, there was only 1.6%.
So it has to do with, obviously, the ease of transportation. If you're closer to the SkyTrain station, I suppose that's what's helping. But also it has to do with how much you can build within those 500 meters, what the zoning is.
Yeah, the 2 most important things we found. You have to have favorable market conditions. That's very important in the study that we found here. Right. And the second thing you got to have is supportive land use, from the city. You have to have zoning in place, your land use has got to be in place, and it's got to be supportive from the city. And if you have those 2 things we found, then there was a real good chance of success for those stations.
So knowing what you know from this study that you did looking at the Expo SkyTrain stations, let's talk about the Canada Line and what kind of effect we'll see from the Canada Line. We've got 2 different jurisdictions, Richmond and Vancouver, involved in the Canada Line. So what do you foresee for that?
Well, we see there's 18 stations on the Canada Line. And what we found is that Richmond is prepared. Like the Capstan station has got about 14 acres of land already available. It's going to have 30,000 units. They're ready, and the Lansdowne station is ready. Vancouver is still a little farther behind. They've got the Pacific Centre problem solved, but not the rest of the problem.
So you mean they haven't figured out how they want to use the land or how they want to zone the land around each station?
The zoning, yes, because when a developer goes in, you can't go into a single-family dwellings that are $800,000. You've got to have usually a nice big piece of industrial ground or commercial ground, 10, 8 acres, 20 acres, and then you put that into high density. So the zoning has to be in place. The city has to be cooperative with the zoning.
Is it key to have the zoning in place at this point, or is there a wait-and-see approach at all advantageous to see once this thing is open and starts to run?
We found that you've got to get your zoning in place now. You should do your zoning before you actually start the station. You have to look at the area. You got to make sure the crime rate. You have to look at the rezoning from industrial to high density, and you have to look at it before you put the station in.
So the eco-density that we've been discussing for some months in Vancouver, how will eco-density play a role in the Canada line?
Well, like I said, all we found was that Richmond is ready with their 4 stations, and Vancouver has just got Pacific Centre solved, and they're looking at Marpole. But the it's got to be a whole different. The planners have to look at it differently than they are now, because you got to get those stations up. You got to get a return from the Canada line. There's a lot of money being spent, and we got to get taxpayers' money back in, and we need those stations for lots of people.
I have to consider what the residents who are already there are thinking about as well.
That's right. Yes.
All right. Thanks very much, Rudy, for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
We'll wait to see what happens in the future.
Thank you.
If you do have any questions for Rudy, or you'd like to find out more about the study, it's really easy to find it. It's online, www.landcor.com. You'll find lots of information about real estate there. 8:48 now, and Christy Gordon, we're talking about Chemainus.
That's
today.
right.